everyone, Julie here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today's video I'm going to have a look at taking some vintage inspired images and creating a wet plate look using Nik collections. So I've got this photo that I took of Emily. It's very sort of film noir, very vintage, and I created a black and white look in Film Pack 7. But what I want to do is I want to take it a step further and I want to create that wet plate look. So I'm currently in Nik7 Analog Efex, and what I'm going to do now, if you scroll down through the list of different looks, there's actually a photo plate. So I'm just going to click that as a favorite so it jumps it up to the top. Now there is a whole heap of different presets that you can play with, so they're always lots of fun. So here's one that I have already played with and I love the look of this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I did. So if you come into the various looks and things that you have, so you've got distressed faded, then there's rich ferrotype, and all of these are slightly different. So there's a weathered dry plate, so you've got wet plate 1, wet plate 2, just takes a minute for them to load. So that one's quite nice too, because it's got that real sort of blur to it. So that's a nice, lovely one. Then there's wet plate 3. Wet plate 4. So I'm sure you get the idea now. They are all slightly different looks, slightly different effects. That one's quite a nice one too. So there's all the way through to wet plate 9. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to the top to this distressed fade. And I'm going to play with a few different things. So if we go up to the panels or the editing panel up here on the right, we've got our histogram, we've got our detail extractor. You can control the brightness, the contrast on your basic adjustments. From there, we've got light leaks, so you can play with a whole heap of different looks. And you've got soft, you've got crisp, and you've got dynamic. So I'm just going to go back to the soft one. Now, I did kind of like this one. Now, I can change the strength of that, which sort of like almost burns it in, if that makes sense. But I can come back and I can change whatever I want. So it is putting a little bit of a color tone into it. You can, if you wish to, you can add control points and you can mask out certain areas, which I am going to do in a minute. So I've then got some different photo plate presets or items that can be applied to it. Again, you can change the strength of these. There are quite a few different options to choose from. So there is, if you want that really streaked wet plate look, you can get those here in the streaked. Then there is also corroded and there is concrete, which sort of gives it another sort of scratched look. But again, I'm going to go back to corroded and this one. Now, I don't want as much on her face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a control point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the strength of that texture within this area. So if I turn that off, see how if I just zoom in, maybe you can see it a bit more. It's quite strong in that area with the texture or the photo plate that I applied. And if I drop that down, and I can change the size of that so it's only sort of affecting her face, I can drop down that quite a bit. So there's a little bit still there, but not as much. It's really comes down to how much you want and how much you don't want. So, and it really doesn't affect the image look that much. Just softens it off a little bit. So that's adding a control point. Now I could do that with the light leaks as well. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to play with the film type. So they've got warm tones that you can apply to it, cool tones, subtle, then there's neutral black and white, and then there's toned black and white. So you can play with various different looks. So Glacier is quite cool and gives sort of that blue tone to it. This one's sort of more of a pinky sort of tone, and then you've got this, it's sort of almost like a it's called Bennett, but it's sort of like almost a sepia tone, but it's a cool sepia tone. If I switched over to the warm, then you have got different looks which will give you more effects as well. So you can come in and you can fade that in or out. You can adjust the strength of it. You can adjust the grain. So if you go all the way to the left, you've got quite a lot of grain per pixel. If you go all the way to the right, then you have less pixels. You can also increase or reduce the hardness of your image as well. So that gives me that terrific sort of wet plate look to it. You can come back, of course, and you can change that. So if you want to go for something a little more streaked, I could pop that in. But I still really liked what I had with the corroded. So I'm going to go back to there. The control point is still there. Do I want to play with more lime? I don't know if I want to play with more light or if I want to keep that as it was. That one's quite nice as well. It has changed the color toning of it, so I might go over to something like warm and just warm that up. That's too much, a little bit. I'm going to drop the strength down on that. So it really can be a lot of fun to play around with this. Don't forget, you do have other looks that you can use in Nik7 Analog Efex. Anything that sort of gives you that vintage analog film look. So you can play around with monochrome looks or motion blur or double exposure, things like that. They are the most fun, I think, to play with in Analog Efex. So that's it for this image. So I started off creating the black and white look in Film Pack 7, and then I brought it into Analog Efex. So this is what I started with, and this is what I have ended up with. So it's sort of given me that wet plate. There's a little bit of sort of bloom on here. There's some dust, some scratches, but I still have some absolutely fabulous details in my face. So I will leave you there. If I save this, it will go back into Photoshop. I did convert this to a smart object so I could bounce backwards and forwards between here and Photoshop. So that's it for this week. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe if you don't. Don't forget to hit the little bell for notifications, and I will see you next time in YouTube. Bye for now.